Pat Brown, you own aircraft. I have owned aircraft in the past. They are wonderful machines, and we get to do all sorts of things. It really does change our life. But you and I, being saintly individuals with massive hearts and compassion out the wazoo, we might occasionally get the thought, hey, I could do something wonderful for other people with this aircraft. I could do charitable work. I could give these folks a ride to, there might be a regulation to pay attention to. All good things, but let's make sure we do it right. Would you agree?
I would agree with you entirely. There might be a regulation.
It's a possibility. Somebody in the government wrote something down about this.
Yeah, but what we got to do is we got to decide what kind of good works are we doing here. What kind of charitable actions are we taking, and that really will govern what reg or regs plural may come into play. Right?
This is the challenge is, and I'll give you an example. I had somebody call me up once and say, hey, you're a pilot. You've got an airplane. My husband and I want to go down to Key West for the weekend. Could you fly us? No, because that's now an illegal commercial flight. On the other hand, if I'm going to Key West to have a meeting and I say, by the way, I got a couple of these empty seats. Does anybody want to go with me? That's acceptable. Understanding how this works is kind of important. And that goes for charitable flights too. If somebody's like, I need to get to a medical appointment in Dallas. Yeah, I could take you, but let's see what the rules are.
Well, you're 99% right on your first statement that if you just say, hey, I'm going to Key West, hey, does anybody want to ride with me? But if you really parse it, are they going because you just happen to be going to Key West, or do they need to go to Key West too? No, we're talking about common purpose here. So you have a reason to go to Key West, and we're talking technicalities, all right, but technicalities can matter. So if you call somebody up and you're going to go to Key West, and I got nothing to do today, and you call me up and say, hey, you want to come down with me to Key West, and we'll split the cost. That's getting a little bit gray. However, if I've got a meeting down in Key West, regardless of what it's for, and we both have a reason to go to Key West, no problem. But common purpose is the key, and there's a bunch of interpretations on that too. I don't have them in front of me, but there's a bunch of interpretations on common purpose. So it's got to be a common purpose, technically speaking. So now, do people do what you said all the time? Absolutely, people do what you said all the time. But
No, I really appreciate this because this is one of those things I've talked to people about for years. And as you say, we even did an episode a while back about interpretations and reinterpretations of the rule. It can change over time. And very often people will just assume, well, I have the best intentions, so I can go do this. And I'm talking Angel Flight or the Air Charity Network or Pilots and Paws. There are a bunch of organizations that really do great work, truly great work. But there's a process to go through. And sometimes you need a nerd like Pat Brown who actually reads regulations to say, oh, wait a minute, there's a way to do this, but it's like this, not like that.
Well, here's the thing about Pilot for Paws and Angel Flight and all of those. The pilots that do these flights are doing this 100% voluntarily. They stand all of the expenses. They're not getting any kind of compensation of any sort. The airport that they land at might offer them a discount on fuel if they know they're coming on an Angel Flight. Our airport does that, 50 cents or something like that a gallon. But they're not receiving any compensation for that flight. And because there's absolutely no compensation, it's not an Uber flight, something like that, where there's money exchanged. It's actually done under Part 91. So all of the regs that essentially pertain to any kind of flying that you're doing is all under Part 91. That said, the pilot should become, especially if you're a private pilot doing something like this, you should become familiar with it's 61.113, I think, which is the privileges and limitations of private pilot. But it never says that you can't do something like this. So charitable flying, such as you're describing there, is a Part 91 operation. So long as no money exchanges hands, they're not paying for the ticket, they're not, or the seat, they're not paying you, they're not reimbursing you for gas. It literally is a free flight with the pilot standing all of the costs. Now you're a Part 91 operation.
That's always been my methodology. Over the course of my career, I'm sure I've flown hundreds of people. I've never even
Yeah,
split costs with anybody. I'm either working as a CFI and getting paid to be on that flight, or I'm just flying my airplane and we're going someplace and I'll cover the entire cost.
yeah,
Don't kick in a dollar. That leaves me on pretty
yep,
solid ground in my case. So I feel good about it. But let's get into this. What if somebody's trying to do some type of a fundraiser thing, helping a charitable organization by
right.
flying rides one day? Is that allowed? Can somebody do that?
That's an entirely different reg. That's 91-146, and I printed out and I'm looking at it here, and it's entitled "Passenger Carrying Flights for the Benefit of Charitable, Nonprofit, or Community Events," and that's the one where you're talking about nonstop flights beginning and ending at the same airport with a 25 statute mile radius, and all kinds of things, a limited number of seats. There may be drug testing requirements. There may have to be a letter of authorization from the local FSDO. This is where you really need to pick up 91.146 and look at it very, very carefully. It's not a terribly long reg, but boy, is it packed with information. So it's entirely different than an angel flight where no money changes hands and it is entirely on the back of the pilot to stand all these costs here. But anything that's fundraising where tickets are sold or where you're essentially holding out for some sort of monetary reason, that's an entirely different ballpark.
I'll make a parallel here. There's a charitable organization here in Florida that's very successful. They've been in business for decades, done wonderful things. And one year they were going to have a casino night as a fundraiser. And they advertised it and it was going great and it was terrific. And then the sheriff came along and go, we don't
Yeah,
do gambling here.
yeah.
That's not legal. And it's the same type of thing. There are parameters. One of the advantages when you're doing that angel flight or pilots and pause and things, there's a whole organization. They know how to do this. You're working under the auspices and guidance of their legal team and all that. If you're going to go off and do it on your own, I'm 100% behind you, Pat. You got to get into the regulations. Find somebody who's professional pilot, who runs a flight school, an airport manager, somebody. Go through those regs. Let's make sure we're doing this right, because that's not the kind of place that you want to get a dozen volunteers doing flights and then you get sanctioned in some way afterwards because you did something with the best of intentions, but you did it wrong.
Yeah, and now you're talking about the FAA getting involved, and you may get an inspector who understands, and is sympathetic, and but nonetheless you're in violation of the FARs potentially, and that carries some consequences. So you're right, Jamie. There's when you look at some of these, let's just pick any company, just any random company, aviation or not, and they're running a contest. Buy one of these and be entered into our contest to win one of those. In the fine print somewhere, I guarantee you're going to find no purchase necessary for alternate entry instructions. Call this number, write this number, send this email, or something like that. Because if they don't do that, they're engaging in a lottery. And depending on where you
Mm-hmm.
are, lotteries may not be independently run. Lotteries like that may not be legal. So yeah, it's the same kind of a thing, just in aviation.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't want to dissuade anybody from getting involved. And I will tell you a personal thing. In 2019, Hurricane Dorian came and just sat over the Bahamas for 2 days. It just devastated the Bahamas. It was horrible. And I'm really proud of this, but I got a phone call saying, can you meet Mark Baker, president of AOPA, and Tom Haynes, senior VP, down in South Florida and run logistics for support to the Bahamas? And people don't really get this because there's also the Port Canaveral here and Port of Tampa. You could load up a big ship with supplies to go to the Bahamas, and they did that. But it takes days. And when general aviation gets involved and people with Cessna 210s and Cherokee 6s and a Caravan and a 172. People just start showing up, and there's great volunteer organizations that manage this stuff. But I was so proud to be involved with AOPA and do that, where we could get aid there literally in an hour. Load up water, chainsaws, gasoline, food, whatever is needed, and you could be in the Bahamas in an hour with it. It was absolutely fantastic. And, by the third day, before the ships had gotten there, I actually got a call from one of the volunteer organizations. I need an aircraft that can carry 10,000 pounds. And I called Mark Baker and said, hey, you know anybody? He said, yes, I do. He gave me a number. By noontime, I had an aircraft that could carry 10,000 pounds, and they were getting aid to people who desperately needed it. So if you've got a heart to do this sort of thing, please do. Work with one of the major organizations, or if there's a disaster, whether it's a hurricane, forest fire, whatever, there's probably an organization right in your area that knows how to do this. Get involved and help, because your airplane can make a huge difference in the lives of people who are really going through a tragedy.
Just do it right, do it according to the regs, and it's all good.
See, it's not just fun. It's not just scenic. It doesn't just prove that we're like rock star cool. It's also good for humanity, Pat. General aviation is a wonderful thing. I'm so proud of us.
I agree with you. Yeah. So,
hey, thanks for watching this video. Please click like, share the video with your friends because they may not know this stuff. Subscribe to the channel because we just love having you here. And Pat, I'll see you and them back here next time.
All right. Adios, pal.